All right. Thanks everyone so much for attending today's webinar. We're really excited. Before we jump in, I would love to introduce our speaker today, Richard Bird, President of Bluebird Strategic Sales and Marketing. Richard believes that the ability of a company to grow and create jobs is a critical part of a functioning society. He takes a strategic and holistic view of marketing to help companies achieve their growth targets. With a career spanning over 25 years, Richard has served as CMO for multiple organizations in the technology, life sciences, industrial, and oil and gas industries. He has commercialized hundreds of technologies, generating over $80 billion in revenue for his clients. He also has overseen the brand and communication strategy for dozens of mergers and acquisitions. Richard was the global creative director at SLB, where he managed several multi-billion-dollar brands, rolled out numerous technologies, oversaw the creative product of the international oil and gas services giant, and managed a large staff located on multiple continents. He also led creative agencies and served in business development roles during his career. Richard has also served in volunteer roles for Houston Cares Animal Rescue, Boy Scouts of America, and on the board of the Houston Business Marketing Alliance. If you can't find Richard working or volunteering, he's probably outdoors camping, hiking, or kayaking, and I know that to be true. So without further ado, I will turn myself off and hand it over to Richard Bird.
Wow, thanks, Shannon. I didn't know I did all that stuff. That's a pretty good introduction. So I think what we want to talk about is messaging and positioning. And that's one of the things that when we work with a lot of different clients, as Shannon mentioned, and something we see gets overlooked a lot of times. And honestly, I really do feel like that it's the foundation of all good marketing starts with messaging and positioning. And to emphasize that, I'd like to do a little exercise with clients when we do this talk. And I'll say, look at this piece of cake. Imagine if you had to sell me this piece of cake. What are some ways you would describe that to me? How would you message that to me? And I hear a lot of the same things when we do it. You know, people say things like, oh, it's chocolatey goodness, and it's moist, and it is, flavorful and rich, and ooey goody, gooey, chocolatey, right? All these great things. And then the thing I tell them at the end is, those are all good adjectives, and you told me that it tastes good and all these things, but no one sold me on it. And everyone's like, well, why? What, chocolate cake is delicious. Why would you not be sold on? Well, the answer is I'm type 1 diabetic. And so if I ate that piece of cake, it would kill me. So all those things where you're trying to tell me how good it tastes and all that is just totally lost on me as a target audience for your thing. So you have to really be able to position it in a way that's meaningful for your prospects. And so that's what we spend a lot of time doing in our strategic workshops. We're doing commercialization workshops or go-to-market strategy workshops, trying to get ahead of that customer and then thinking about how are we going to message and position this relative to the bad guys, the competitors. So what got me interested in positioning and messaging is back when I worked for a big oilfield services company. We worked, very closely with the commercial teams. I was in the marketing team, and one of our products was this product that we had launched, and it was a very lucrative product. And it was it generated a lot of money for us. It was one of these things that we build it out at like $350,000 a run, and we would run it 5 or 6 times per well across a lot of wells across the world. And it was a multi-billion-dollar tool or service that we provided. But what we found was that when we came out with a new version of it that had a larger manifold and it could access samples from the rock formation that the previous version couldn't do. And so we were used to talking to geologists and geophysicists about this new offering. And so we talked about how it could sample from Darcy and all these kind of nerdy geological features and benefits when we positioned it. Well, it didn't do that well in the market when we relaunched it with these things, with those new features. And we thought, why are we getting paid back like we should with this tool? Well, one of the side effects of being able to sample from tighter rock formations, it also went faster and improved that process. And then one of the things that they run into in that line of work is if a tool is stationed for a long time, then the problem that you run into is that tool could get stuck downhole, which is a big problem because now you've got a multi-million-dollar problem you just created for yourself. Well, the quicker you can do that, the less likely you are that the tool will get stuck downhole. So we changed our messaging to incorporate that. Less time on station, so to reduce the risk of being stuck. Well, once we made that change, that really opened up a whole new market to us within that same client. So the drillers now were very interested in this tool, and they hated the tool before. And they have control a big chunk of the budget for buying that service. So when we were able to change our messaging to something that incorporated, that included the values and for what the customer really wanted, it enabled us to get greater pricing power. It shortened our sales cycle, generated a lot more money for the company, and to the tune of billions of dollars with a B. So when I learned that, I thought, you know what? This messaging and positioning thing is powerful because it was the same tool, same target audience, or customer base, but new people inside the organization. We accessed a whole new pile of revenue that we just were not recognizing prior. And I thought this is something I should pay attention to. So that got me down this road of positioning and messaging and using that for our clients. So let's talk a little bit about how we do it. How do we do that at Bluebird? So let's talk a little bit about the basics of messaging and positioning. Well, the founder or the godfather of positioning in America is this guy named Jack Trout. Like he and his partner Al Reese came up with the whole term of positioning. And he says positioning is not something you do to an offering. Positioning is something you do inside the mind of a customer. And if you think about that definition and what I just described, it's exactly what we did. It was the same offering, but we just changed the way that customer thought about that offering. And that's really a big switch that when you can do that, you can access tons of value for your clients and for your company. All right. So what we say is marketing is simple, but it's not easy. It's all revolves around who are we talking to, what keeps them up at night, and how do we solve that problem better than anyone else in the world. And once you understand that can form the crux of your position. And we have a tool that we use that is very similar to Mad Libs. I don't know if anyone played Mad Libs when they were young, but this may surprise you, but I was a super nerdy kid, and I love Mad Libs. And anytime I got a chance to go on a road trip or anything, I always make my family play along with Mad Libs for me. And it's a really fun game because what you do is there's a story. You don't know what the story is, but the person who is going to tell the story later will ask for certain things like, give me a noun, give me a body part, give me a verb, give me a proper noun. And then all of a sudden, once you assemble all those together, you get a funny story. Well, we will think about positioning in a similar way, where we want to fill in these blanks for our story that we're going to tell around positioning and messaging. And so what we're going to want to do is look at who's our target customer, what's the statement of opportunity, what is the service category we're playing in, what are the key benefits of our offering, who are the competitors, and what's our differentiation. So we're going to go very deep on all those in the next section here. So let's talk a little bit about target customers. This is the one that I'm glad we're leading it off because it's really the most important thing. If we don't know who our target customer is, it's very, very hard to position something that's going to be meaningful for them. So for instance, with that chocolate cake, that chocolate cake example works for most people. It didn't work for me because I'm probably a terrible ideal target customer for chocolate cake since I'm diabetic. But I do buy a lot, right? Because my wife likes chocolate cake, my son likes it, Bluebird employees seem to like it, So I bought a lot of chocolate cakes. And so knowing that target audience is so important and what keeps them up at night. So a lot of times when we work with clients and they've positioned something or they've released something to the market, we'll ask them, what is the target audience? Who's your ideal target audience? And they'll tell us things like oil and gas operators in the Gulf of Mexico, or women between the ages of 25 and 45, or, these kinds of things. And I throw something out there. But a lot of times what we're looking for is to get a lot more specific. So when you say oil and gas operators operating in the Gulf of Mexico, who are you talking about? Are you talking about the managers? Are you talking about the people that actually are going to be using the tool? Are you talking about drillers? Are you talking about, what is the psychographics of those people? Is it people who worked with us in the past and like us? Or is it people who work with our competitors but don't like them competitors? Who are we talking to? And how would we recognize that person? Like if I got on an elevator ride with somebody and I could sell to them, if I could recognize them for that company, what do they look like? How would I recognize that person? Where do they hang out? So if we're going to access that audience later, where are we going to advertise? Do they belong to associations? Do they go to trade shows? Do they live on LinkedIn? Like how are we going to access these people? And how do they make their buying decisions? Right? Where are they in their buying journey, most likely? Right? Do they even know that your product exists? These are kind of things that we really have to dig deeper on. And that's where most people barely scratch the surface on that. So target customers, if you don't know who you're talking to, it's very, very hard to sell. So the way we do it is a lot of times, especially for B2B clientele, we will actually find the person on LinkedIn that they are talking to. So once we know their job title and the size of company they're working for, where they're at from a geographical perspective, all that stuff, we can actually find a pretty good prospect on LinkedIn. And so we'll find that person and we will let them tell us what their key responsibilities are. They'll tell us what their education and is and where they like to find their information. What LinkedIn groups are they in? Where do they hang out? Where do they get their information? Then also we're going to want to know what they value. What are their fears and frustrations? And what are their purchasing criteria? These are things that don't necessarily come out on LinkedIn. They won't say these things on LinkedIn. This is something where through workshops and through working with our clients, we can figure out what we think these things are. There's a certain amount of assumptions with that. And a good deal, sometimes we'll actually do some voice of customer research for our clients and ask them these things directly. Like, what is it you want from a vendor in this space? Ask them big questions, big open-ended questions, and try to get to the bottom of what really they're looking for from somebody and what aggravates them. When they fire a vendor, like why did they fire them? Or for our client, like what gets them, the prospect, fired? What do they get a bonus for? What do they get raises for? We want to understand that stuff so we can align with what is keeping them up at night. The next thing on our Mad Lib is a statement of opportunity. So this kind of goes into that persona, right? This is the second part of that persona. What is keeping the client up at night? What annoys them? How are we going to solve that problem? This is the big thing that is the problem your offering solves. And really, it's what's in it for them. If you go back to that position of the chocolate cake that we did earlier, if you would have said, look, we're going to give you a snack that's affordable, it's communal, and your entire team is going to love it. You might not be able to eat it, Richard, but your team is going to love it, and they're going to think you're awesome for buying them that chocolate cake. Well, that is something that's in it for me, right? If you convince me to try to eat it, it's not going to happen. So that's really what we're looking for. So if we were to do a statement of opportunity for that chocolate cake, it would be a shareable, delicious snack for your entire team. Okay, well, that's good. That is a That's something I need from time to time. The next part of our Mad Lib is this service and product category. So this is, what is it we're selling? What is this product category we're selling into? What do our clients think that they're buying? What our competitors call it? So an example of a product category would be mid-size luxury sedan, or deep water ESP system, or low price fast food value meal, right? So, when I say that, you can think of all the different value meals that are out there in that competitive landscape. And one example we like to do is a little bit of a thought experiment with our clients, is to say, what is it that we are actually selling? And so an example we use to describe this is a steakhouse metaphor. I'm a Texan. I love steaks, and I like to go to a good steakhouse every now and then. And so if you think about what a steakhouse is selling, what you sell, what your customers buy, and how you make your money can be three different things, all in the same business. And people will say, what the heck are you talking about, Richard, when I tell them that? But when we think about it from a steakhouse perspective, what is it that steakhouses are selling? It's not a trick question. They're selling steaks. But what is it that the customer is actually buying when you go to a steakhouse? If you think about your last trip to a steakhouse, probably didn't go there by yourself, to fill a hole in your stomach, right? You probably brought someone there. Maybe it was a client. Maybe it was a significant other that you wanted to impress. Well, that is, if you think about what you're buying, you can get a steak anywhere. You can buy a steak from a steak sandwich shop, right? You can get a steak from Golden Corral. You can make a steak yourself at home. But what you're really buying is that experience, right? That's why I chose this steakhouse. Yeah, it's a nice one, right? The owners of this steakhouse, and featured in this image, they know they're selling an experience, right? They got the mahogany walls, cool artwork, dim lighting. They probably have excellent service. And that is, they know they're selling that experience. And what that means is they are going to charge a lot of money, because that's part of the experience. If you want someone that you really love a lot, a very cheap steak, that didn't show them that you are trying to, that they mean a lot to you, right? When you say you mean a lot to me and I'm willing to spend a lot of money to impress you, that sends a certain message. But then the big question is, how do they make their money? We know what they're selling. We know what your customer's buying. They make their money on wine markup, right? And so that's all part of the whole steakhouse experience. So it's a good way to think about it when you're about your audience and what it is they're really, really buying from you, right? Is it risk mitigation, like that story that we were talking about earlier? They didn't want to buy the ability to sample from type rocks. They didn't add a lot of value to their organization. But when we told them, we're going to reduce your risk of making a $30 million mistake, well, that was very valuable to their organizations, right? So that's what we're really selling, with risk mitigation. The key benefits, that gets us right into this, the key benefit. Why would someone want to buy this thing that you're trying to sell them? What's the main problem it solves? And how's it going to help them sleep better at night? That's one of the things that we like to tell our clients, is that every product, when someone buys it, they're hiring it to do a job. What is the job this tool is being hired to do? And that is get you right into the key benefit that you're talking about. And that sounds like it will be a very easy, straightforward thing, but really it's not. And we work with a lot of very incredibly smart, capable engineers that are very technically minded. And they've been working on solving these technical problems or adding this feature or functionality to a product. And they've invested millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions, maybe sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in developing that feature or that functionality. So that's what they think that their, the benefit is that feature, but there's a big difference between features and benefits. And the benefit is sometimes you don't even need to mention the enabling feature that did it. And so it's very hard for people to think about things that way because they want to talk about all this cool features and check off all those boxes that they thought the customer was asking for, but really it's asking them to solve a problem that's keeping them up at night. And that's the benefit. And so sometimes we have to spend quite a bit of time in our strategic workshops talking about, well, and pushing back. It's not that you have 230 measurements. The client doesn't care about that 230 measurements. They care about the ability to analyze this or detect this gene in their medical device. These are the kind of things that we really push back on in workshops. Primary differentiation. So this one is another big one. And this is someone that we see quite a bit as people have not really thought about their differentiation that clearly and really got a little creative on it. Sometimes it's really evident that they have a clear technological differentiator. In those cases, it's easy. But more and more, we're finding that having a clear technological differentiator is harder to do because most markets have gotten pretty mature, and even if you can't do it, or even your competitors can't do it to the same extent that you have that differentiation, it's very hard to convince customers that there is nobody else that does exactly what you're doing. So really, this is one you have to spend a lot of time thinking about and really thinking through. How is this offering better than the competitive offerings, or how are they currently solving the problem? Most problems are not completely unsolvable. Usually the clients are doing some kind of workaround. Maybe it's not sufficient or elegant as you're offering, but they would probably think that they have solved it. And so you have to convince them why you're doing it, why your way is a better way. And one of the things that we talk about is that everything can be differentiated with enough creativity. So for instance, you've been to a convenience store recently and you went to go grab a bottle of water. Well, there's a lot of bottles of water in there. And they're not all priced the same, right? Some of them are a little different. Some of them are like the cheap, Nestle's water, right? And then you've got Fiji water and Smart water and all these other different kinds of water out there. And they all have their story about what makes them different from their competitors. And then for some of that differentiation, if you want your water to come from an ancient well in Fiji, well, you're gonna have to pay a little more for that. And it's all a marketing story that they have done and positioned Fiji water to be more expensive than Nestle water that came out of your, tap water of your local municipality, right? One of our clients is called Berkman International, and they are in the personality assessment industry. And there are tons and more every day of personality assessments that have come up. And they're really valuable tools for understanding your workforce and getting the most out of your workforce and driving that employee satisfaction within your workforce. And, when we started working with them, we talked about what makes them different. And in such a crowded space, there was not an obvious answer at first. But after we began to talk to them about how they go about doing things and what they really value as an organization, it was all about teamwork. And their tool really had some capabilities that none of their competitors have. And a lot of them were talking about how their tool is a good predictor of executive behavior, how it's good for sales teams and predicting whether a sales and recruit is going to perform good in their role. This company didn't really subscribe to that. They're not worried about predicting whether that person's going to be good or not. They want to know how well that person's going to behave on a team, because most companies, you're going to work as part of a team. And is that going to be a dynamic, highly functioning team with the addition of this person? Well, that's what their tool can help people do. Well, once we came up with that differentiation, that's the core of a lot of our messaging and marketing, and the core of our position is that we're going to empower teams to perform better. And the thing about differentiation that really is important, and this is something that Jack Trout says, is that once you own that differentiation in the market, and you can own that position in the market, and it's rightfully yours. But you're not aggressive about communicating it, someone else can swoop in and do it. Because remember, positioning is not something you do to a product, something you do in the mind of your prospect. So if you haven't claimed that position in that customer's mind through marketing and advertising and building those positive brand associations around your differentiation, then it's anybody's game to go out there and grab it. So this is when you have to be aggressive and really go fill that space in the market and educate the customers about your position. So putting it all together, once we do that, we have all those descriptors, or those collected all that information for the Mad Libs. Here's what it looks like. Put it all together in this grid. And then once we have it all together in that grid, we put it together in a positioning statement. So this is a positioning statement for a client of ours called Energy Ogre. And they are a membership service that helps you find the best rate on your electric plans. And so for them, this was their positioning statement. For residential electricity consumer who are connected to the deregulated grid in Texas and want to consistently get the best price on electricity without the headache of searching for rate plans, Energy Ogre is an electricity consumer advocate that helps save money, time, and headaches, so Texans can rest easy knowing they have the best rate available. Unlike plan selectors and regional electricity providers, Energy Ogre is the only REP agnostic company that provides information and manages plan transitions for their customers. So you can see that in here, we highlighted the target customer, what that statement of opportunity was for that target customer. They want to consistently get the best price on their electricity without the headache of searching rate plan. We talked about what their service category is. And this is a really interesting one because in this case, we created a whole new category. It's very important that your category be something that people can understand. And, no one else in that market is truly an electricity consumer advocate. Nobody's out there looking to get you the best rate, right? They want to sell their rate plans at the best rate for them, not for you. And so Energy Ogre is the only company in Texas that does that. So we were able to create this whole new category for ourselves that no one else can play in. The key benefits, save money, time, and headaches, so that they can rest easy knowing they have the best rate available. Who's our competing alternatives? Well, it's those bad guys we talked about, the Texas Power to Choose and other price selector tools, retail electricity providers like NRG and TXU, and then other organizations that look like Energy Ogre but really are not. That's companies like Power Wizard and other similar apps. And then our primary differentiation is they're the only REP agnostic company that provides information and manages the transition for their customers. So not only do they find you the best plan, they sign you up for it. That's it. Super easy, right? I did this presentation for a client of mine, and he said, "Hey, wait, not so fast. It's not that easy." And because this looks easy and it's not that easy. So he was right. And so he was right to call me out on it. And what we talked about then was like, how do you take this to the next level? Because I think digging deep on all those things and finding out does help you a lot. But today's world is a complicated B2B selling environment. So one question we like to add to this is, why should I believe you? And, I think today people are naturally skeptical and they need proof in order to believe you. They're going to want proof points. One of the things that we tell our clients is that words tell and numbers sell. So put together case studies, testimonials, technical papers, these kinds of things that are going to answer the questions that those customers have when they're rightfully skeptical. And one tool that we use to think about that is this buyer archetypes. And one of the things that we see a lot is that a lot of times the buying environment can be quite complex. And we have some stats to kind of talk about that. But there are a lot of people involved when you have a big enterprise level sell. And one of the things that we see a lot, and one of the things we use to kind of diagnose that for our clients, is this 2x2 grid. So on the left axis point there, you've got your product complexity. So how simple is that product, and how complex is that product? And on the bottom, we've got how complex is the selling environment? Is it a very simple one, or is it a complex one? And so we have examples for each one of these. So that lower left, that's the easiest one. Think about that one. We call that buyer archetype the serve me archetype, because what you're doing, you're selling them a very simple product, and you only have to sell it to one person or two people. It's a very easy buying environment. And the thing I like to use for that as an example is paper towels. Paper towels at my house are not a big deal, and but we need them. And Amazon has made it very, very easy for us to get paper towels. We get the paper towels we want at the price we want, and they're delivered to our front porch once a month in a big box. They've made it very easy. They served me those paper towels and made it as easy as it could be for me to buy those. Now let's go up one level here on the same left-hand side. Let's go to where you have a more complex product, but you're still selling to a simple buying environment. And the example I like to use for that is cars. At my house, I'm the car buyer. My wife does not get that heavily involved in car buying purchases. Sometimes I come home from work with a new car, and it may seem like an impromptu purchase, but it really, I do a ton of research before I buy a car. In fact, whenever I buy a car, I usually know more about that car than the person I'm buying it from. And I don't know if that says anything about how nerdy I am in my research phase, or that speaks poorly on the car salesman out there. But that's a very complex purchase. It can be a pretty risky purchase, right? And it's an expensive purchase. So I watch tons of videos. I watch a lot of reviews. I read the manufacturer's website. And by the time I go there, like I said, I'm pretty knowledgeable about that thing. I feel secure about my purchase. I know what those cars should be selling for, and I know what the interest rates are. So I go in there eyes wide open and make a good purchase. Now, let's go over to the other side. So let's go down to a highly complex environment, but a simple product. So the example we like to use here is, let's say you're selling hammers to NASA. Wow, okay. Now that's going to be harder. And that's why this archetype is called Guide Me, because you're going to have to guide that buyer through your selling process, and you're going to have to be guided by them through their buying process, right? And you're going to have to figure out who all else is going to have to be involved in that buying decision to buy hammers at NASA. And it'll be a lot of people. And then finally, you get that one in the upper right-hand corner. This is where a lot of our clients play. And this is called the Enlighten Me. So you're selling a complex product in a complex buying environment. Well, that is challenging. And that leads to long sales cycles. That leads to having competitors in there. That probably means you're going to be talking to procurement people, all these things. And, an example we use for that is when you're selling, let's say you're selling a telescope component to NASA. Wow. Okay. Now then, you're going to have a lot of people in that buying committee. So that's a tough one, right? And so what we're seeing is that this is happening more and more out there. And it's called consensus-based selling. And that's when you have to convince a lot of people to do it. And I don't know about you, but I can't, it's very hard for me to convince my family on where we should go to dinner. And we all know we need to go to dinner, and we're all hungry. And one person wants Thai, the other person wants a hamburger, the other person wants pizza. And we have to kind of battle it out. But according to Gartner, this consensus-based selling is nothing new. It's been around for a long time, but it's something that just keeps getting more and more intense. So one of the things that I saw in their latest report was that 77% of B2B buyers state that their last purchase was very complex or difficult. So not only you hear about salespeople complaining about how hard it is to sell these days, well, it's no picnic for the clients either. They called it complex or difficult. And 10 people are involved in the purchase decision for the average B2B sell these days. And this is an increase from 8 people in 2017. So you can see that it's a problem that's been there for a while, and it's just intensifying. And the thing we like to say about this is that customers don't all have to say yes, but it only takes one to say no. So how are you positioning it for those people in that group so that they won't say no, and they will say yes, and they will become your advocate, and they will become an advocate for your advocate inside the organization? Well, that means that you just 10x your effort, right? If there's 10 people involved in it and it only takes one of them to say no, you've got to position it for all of those people. And you have to understand those people as much as you do that ideal target customer. This is where you have to kind of break it down. Like, what's keeping the procurement person up at night? They're not evil people. They get beat up on a lot of our workshops, right? Because people don't want to have to deal with them. But they have their goals and objectives that they're responsible for in the organization. It may not be aligned with the salesperson's, but you have to figure out what that is, and you have to figure out how to make them successful and how to make them go, you know what? These are the right people we should be working with. And not only that, but how do you align your offering to their buying process, right? So what does that look like? How do they buy? And how are you going to work your positioning and messaging into that buying structure? Thank you guys for joining us and taking time out of your valuable lunch break. And hopefully you learned a lot today. We are here to serve you guys. So if anybody has any questions about messaging or positioning, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or just shoot me an email. And you can go to fill out a form on our website, thebluebird.com. And I would love to help you answer any questions. I also like to take this opportunity to say that we do, as I've touched on earlier, we do a lot of commercialization workshops and go-to-market strategy workshops. So if you're struggling with your position for your company, we'd love to talk to you about how you might be able to improve that. And perhaps one of our workshops would be a good fit for you. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed your time today, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. Thanks a lot.